I'm Rick Murphy, CEO and founder of Cogent Growth Partners. If you're a technology services provider or an MSP thinking about growth, acquisitions, and how to achieve a realistic liquidity strategy or an eventual exit, this show is for you. This is Cogent Conversations.
When an MSP asks themselves, why do I want to sell? What should they be thinking?
Well, that's a really good question. You know what's really funny is that I get asked that by potential suitors all the time. And they know that we try to meet people and basically recruit them. You know, we're not working with brokered conversations very often. You know, we help the buy side, but we're also helping the sell side, right? So a lot of times they'll say, well, why are they ready? Why do they want to sell? And the first response is because we're charming and we have good ideas, and it's a really good idea to join forces. There's lots of good reasons, but mainly, you know, most IT business owners, their investment in their companies, their single largest investment next to their house, and probably more so than their home, right? They might have other investments if the company's been making money for a long time, which a lot of them have. You know, they've been doing it for years, and they do fine. They do just fine the way they are now, and they've been putting plenty of money in the bank and paying for the kids' college and all that kind of stuff. You know, the real reason is it time to take some money off the table, take some chips off the table, and then what do you do next? Do you keep going and work for the acquirer? We call them a suitor, right? Do you work for the acquiring company? Because most of these deals are mergers. Most of them are about building talent. You know, it's a talent acquisition most often. Rarely, one of the big myths is, buying a book of business. You know, everybody wants to be a buyer, and, we're going to buy a book of business and grow the business. And that's usually really not true. It's the people that make the company worth it, right? A lot of the value in a company is the people and management and the ownership. And a lot of our clients really like it when ownership stays. So, the things they have to think about is, am I employable? Can I work well and play well with other people? It's been a while since I had a boss or I had somebody to answer to, which could be a good thing for some people, right? We work with, that's where the transaction therapy thing came from, really, if you think about it. You know about us, and we practice transaction therapy here at Cogent. Back of the business card says providing IT transaction therapy to IT business owners since 2010 when we started. And a lot of people chuckle and laugh when they hear us say that out, but it's so true, especially people that have done it before. Like, oh, it's just, dealing with all of the psychological issues, even from the buyer and the buyer's team and all the people around on the buyer side. And it's not just about the numbers. And then the same thing on the seller side, it's just this emotional roller coaster. And there's multiple people running the business and partners in the business. And are they all on the same page? And what's everybody going to do, once the deal's done? So there's a lot to think about. And we certainly are able to talk with people with, not on the clock, if you will, and just talk through different things like that.
So what does winning look like for the MSP, not necessarily the buyer?
Well, so the MSP getting a stronger talent bench is the very first thing. A lot of people might go think clients first, but that's really, I think, wrong. I think it's really having a much deeper bench and people that are smart people that you bring into the company. What's the old adage about married men? They're all the good ones are gone, or the same thing about all the good women are married. So, you think about, all the smart talent are employed. And how do you get them? And how do you recruit them? Do you poach them from other companies? And so when you do a merger, which every deal is a merger one way or the other, depends. It doesn't matter who acquires who. It's still a merger.
Interesting.
And that's mergers and acquisitions is a bit of an oxymoron, actually, but every deal is a merger. And you're merging talent. How do you merge the tools? Do I got a better tool stack? Do I do stuff now that I wasn't able to do before? Cybersecurity is a really good example of that. I've got an MSP. We've been dabbling in selling cybersecurity offerings, other people's stuff for a while. But do I really have anybody inside my company that owns that and knows how to do that? And wow, I just bought a 4 or 5. The size doesn't really matter, but I just bought a cybersecurity focused practice, and we're going to bolt them into our MSP and start offering more deeper cybersecurity offerings to our current clientele. that's a really good reason for doing a deal. Actually, I'm working on one of those right now with a very large accounting company that has a quite substantial MSP component to their business. It's a standalone MSP servicing their customers all over the country, and we're looking at a cybersecurity company right now for that very reason.
So when an MSP is looking to sell,
Hmm.
winning to them, well, I guess it really depends on their
Go ahead.
plan. So if an MSP is selling tomorrow, what are they going to
Hmm.
be doing Monday morning?
Well, that's a whole different question. Let's come back to winning for a second, then we'll come back to that question. Let's put a pin in
Good.
that for a second. So, on the winning side, winning is improving your team, improving your tool stack, broadening your customer base, perhaps diminishing any client concentrations you might have had before the transaction happened.
Hmm.
You've got one client that's 20% of your business, but now you just brought on 50 new clients or 100 new clients, and there might be some larger clients. There certainly will be larger clients in that mix, and so that helps reduce client concentration, which makes the acquiring company, the combined entity, more valuable later, almost instantly, actually. So winning can take on a lot of factors, and the big part of the win that you hope is true, which is usually true, is the company makes more money afterwards too. So there's more to go around, and then hopefully everybody that's participating benefits. That's really that's what a win is. And then are you staged? Have you learned something, and can you do it again?
Hmm.
Because sometimes people are one and done. They do an acquisition that's enough for them. But most of our clients are repeat customers. Most buyers are repeat serial acquirers, um, and that makes a big difference.
But when the MSP is selling, how often do they stay in the business? How often do they leave? Do you have numbers on that? Do you have a feeling on that? The
It's
owner
not
I'm
a
talking about.
feeling. We experience it all the time. Numbers would be misleading if you just went with percentages and what have you. But
Right.
actually, what I talked about, the idea that this is more of a talent acquisition than a buy a book of business acquisition,
Mm,
which is a very common misnomer. Everybody think, oh, we'll just buy a book of business and it's going to be great. It's almost never the truth.
right.
It's almost always a talent acquisition. Um, Ownership stays more often than you'd believe. It's definitely a personality thing. Can I work well and play well with others? Because I haven't done it in a while. I've been running my business for 25 years, and am I employable? Yes, you are. Believe it or not, you can be. A lot of people find that to be actually luxurious. They're not having to do everything all the time anymore, especially at the ownership level. Um, so, most of our deals, the bulk of them, the owners stay.
Hmm.
I would say probably a quarter of them, maybe a third, do move on. And then there's a few people that want to stay that discover they shouldn't. And then there's a few people that think they should leave and they discover they should stay.
Hmm.
So we see all sides of that. But for most of what we do at Cogent, being on the buy side and so forth, and helping people grow and know them over time, because we've got clients we've worked with for over a decade now. We're going to be 16 years old in a couple of weeks, and we've worked with clients for a very long
Congratulations.
time. Um, so in those situations, uh, I would say the um, the majority, better than 55, 50, 60% stay. And I think if we did some real research, I'd think we'd find it'd be more like 70%.
Hmm. And if the MSP is asking, Rick, am I prepared for someone else to run my baby? What kind of talk do you have when they say this or think it?
Well, they're not. That's the first answer is they're not.
They're not
That's
thinking
one
that.
Well, no, they're likely thinking that, but it's a misnomer again, right?
Oh, I
It's
see.
hey, I'm going to sell the company, and the day after we close, I'm not going to run anything anymore. Is usually not the truth.
Hmm.
Now, whether there's a transition, and let's say the owner really does want to move on, and it's time to move to Hawaii and open a surf shop, or
Hmm.
whatever, which happens. That actually did happen once. True story. But that's not always the case. It's almost never the case. The idea is you're going to stay with the company and help the transition happen so that the customer relationships transition. And people
Hmm.
talk about, again, this is sort of the difference between a broker deal and thinking that you're buying this asset or this physical thing. You're really buying a team, and you're buying a family of people, and
Hmm.
talented people that want to keep doing what they do. And how do you nurture that and grow that? And when it comes back to answering your question, I think it's really, you're going to stay 6 months to a year. If you want to move on, they're going to need you to stick around to transition the customer relationships. And where I was going with that customer relationship is just because you have a contract with somebody doesn't mean you own that customer. The relationship is owned by the company that's servicing them and the people that are doing that servicing. And so when you bring those people in, retaining that customer relationship and transitioning that is one of the most important things. That's really what you're buying, is the relationship, not a customer agreement. I could have an agreement with you all day long, but I can't make you stay with me.
That's right.
Right.
So the whole mindset of just personal readiness for this MSP owner to sell, and the reason why they want to do it. Is there any other factor that you can think of why they should consider it, and why?
Stick around for the rest of our series of podcasts as we go, and we can talk about that forever. I mean, that's probably a series of podcasts over time. You know, one of the key things, and we're actually going to be at the MSP Expo, IT Expo, MSP Expo, the week of the 9th in February down in Florida. So if you have a chance to come and see us, we've got a 4-hour block where we're working on a couple of different subjects. One of them is called Add Backs and Synergies. And the other ones is the top 5 things you need to do to start thinking about, how do you run your company now to be ready to do something later. One of the biggest things, just as a general broad overview, is run your company today like you're going to sell it tomorrow. And, what does that mean? Well, let's take add backs as an example. Whether you know what an add back is or not, is, hey, I've got this one-time only expense. I just redesigned my website and it would cost us $50,000. It cost us $100,000 to do our website. And we just spent a bunch of time and effort on it. But you're not going to do that every year. Now you've got this perfectly good website. You got to maintain it. There's a cost to that. There's there's time and effort that has to be done to keep it up to speed. But, you're not going to spend $100,000 every year doing that. But you did spend $100,000, last year in 25. Let's say it's the beginning of 2026 today. It's in January. So, hey, last year you spent $100,000 on a website. And are you going to do that again this year? No. And so is that $100,000 need to be allotted for in your free cash flow, in your EBITDA? The answer is no. You spent the money, but your company earned the money that allowed you to spend that money. So a buyer would you call that an add back to your EBITDA? It would be an adjustment to your EBITDA, trailing EBITDA, so that if you were making, let's say, $1 million unadjusted, well, they would adjust that back, the bulk of that back. So they would say now your adjusted EBITDA was $1.1 million. So if you think about that in a macrocosm, how many other things like that are in the company? How many, I won't get too detailed on expenses. And again, there's probably a session we should do all about just this, but the idea that you are, stop running your company because of what your tax accountant tells you to do would be my best advice. This is Cogent Conversations.